There's a game happening tonight that nobody in Indiana wanted to see play out this way. The Fever are heading to Las Vegas, and the most important player in their franchise, arguably the most important player in the entire league right now, is not on the plane. Caitlin Clark is sitting this one out. And before anyone rushes to frame that as a simple injury management decision, a routine rest call, a responsible organizational choice, stop. Because the full picture of what's happening here is considerably more complicated, considerably more revealing, and considerably more uncomfortable than that clean narrative suggests. This isn't just about one missed game. This is about everything that's been building for months, finally showing its face in the most visible way possible. The Indiana Fever are walking into Las Vegas tonight with their engine removed and their wiring exposed. And what's underneath is exactly what critics have been pointing at all season long. The conversation about Stephanie White's coaching philosophy didn't start this week. It didn't start last month. It has been a sustained, serious, recurring thread throughout this entire season, and it centers on one fundamental tension. Caitlin Clark's game demands a specific environment to function at its highest level. It demands spacing. It demands pace. It demands a system built around ball movement, perimeter creation, and the kind of gravity that forces defenses to make impossible choices. That is the system that transformed Indiana from a franchise nobody was watching into one of the most commercially and competitively relevant teams in the league. What Stephanie White appears far more comfortable deploying looks considerably different. It's slower. It's more isolation-dependent. It runs through one-on-one creation, through high-volume shot attempts generated by a single offensive engine grinding against a set defense. It is, in a very real sense, the Indiana Fever offense that existed before Clark arrived, the Kelsey Mitchell era, the era of ball pounding, pull-up jumpers, and offensive possessions that live or die based on whether one player is making shots from difficult positions on any given night. Tonight, without Clark in the lineup, that's exactly what Indiana is heading into Las Vegas with. And the segment of the basketball world that has been raising alarms about White's coaching preferences all season has a very uncomfortable point to make right now. This game, structured exactly as it is, may be the version of Indiana basketball that their own coaching staff finds most familiar, most comfortable, most like home. Whether that's a fair characterization or an unfair one, the evidence on the floor tonight will speak for itself. Before breaking down what Indiana is working with, it's worth being precise about exactly what they're walking into, because the Las Vegas Aces, even navigating their own availability questions heading into this game, are not a team that requires their best player to be dangerous. Jackie Young has been finding her rhythm all season and is currently averaging 16 points with 7 assists per game. That's a primary offensive option capable of taking over a game independently. Kennedy Carter, operating off the bench, has been contributing approximately 14 points per game in a reserve role, meaning Las Vegas gets starter-level production from a player that doesn't even open the game in the starting five. Chelsea Gray continues to do what Chelsea Gray does, providing veteran playmaking and scoring at 13 points and 7 assists per game, controlling the pace of games with the kind of composed authority that only comes from years of winning at the highest level. And then there's Alyssa Thomas. In her most recent performance, Thomas posted 29 points and 8 rebounds. 29 and 8. That is what the Aces are generating from their interior presence, even when their roster is not at full strength. That number alone reframes the entire front court conversation for tonight's matchup, because Indiana is going to send Aaliyah Boston out to handle that problem. And Aaliyah Boston, this season, has not looked like a player capable of handling that problem.
The Aces have something that very few teams in this league have genuinely built: real depth. Multiple options, multiple players capable of stepping into an expanded role on any given night and delivering significant production without the team losing its competitive footing. If one shooter goes cold, another one gets hot. If one creator struggles, another one takes the wheel. That redundancy is not an accident. It is the direct product of sustained, intentional roster construction, combined with coaching that consistently extracts maximum value from every available body on the roster. That is what organizational excellence looks like in practice, and it creates a margin for error that Indiana simply does not have access to tonight. So what does Indiana actually have to work with? Let's be honest about it, without sugarcoating anything, because the players deserve that honesty more than they deserve false optimism. Kelsey Mitchell is a legitimate scorer. That part is not in dispute. On her best nights, Mitchell is as difficult to contain in one-on-one situations as any guard in this league. She has the quickness, the pull-up game, and the competitive drive to manufacture points from nothing. That ability is real, and it matters. But here is the brutal mathematical reality of tonight's situation. The difference between Mitchell having an efficient shooting night and an inefficient one is essentially the difference between Indiana being competitive and Indiana getting run out of the building. When Mitchell is locked in, flowing within a rhythm, getting good looks from positions she favors, Indiana has an offense. When Mitchell is forcing contested pull-ups, grinding through set defenses, jacking up high-volume attempts without the spacing and movement that a true system would generate around her, Indiana's offensive numbers deteriorate at a speed that the rest of the roster cannot compensate for. And that's the problem. This team does not have the complementary pieces to absorb an off night from its primary offensive option when that option is not Caitlin Clark. Clark's gravity creates open shots for others, even when she isn't scoring. Clark's playmaking generates transition opportunities. Clark's presence forces defenses into decisions they don't want to make, and those decisions create openings that the entire roster benefits from. When she is on the floor, Indiana is a different team functionally, not just statistically. When she is not, Indiana becomes entirely dependent on whether Kelsey Mitchell is making shots. And tonight, in Las Vegas, against an experienced defensive roster with a coaching staff that has spent years preparing for exactly this kind of game, that is a very thin thread to hang a competitive performance on. Aaliyah Boston is one of the most discussed players on this roster, and the conversation around her this season has taken a direction that nobody who watched her early career would have anticipated. She came into the league as a paint-dominant force, a player who imposed her will in the post, controlled the glass, generated points through physical positioning and precision footwork in the interior. That was her identity. That was the game that justified the organizational investment and the roster spot. This season, Boston has drifted. The paint dominance has become intermittent. The consistency that defined her early career has been replaced by stretches of relative invisibility, by possessions where her presence feels passive rather than assertive, by games where a $6 million investment in the front court generates returns that don't match the cost. Tonight, she is going up against a player who, in her most recent game, put up 29 and 8. Alyssa Thomas is not a player who allows passivity to go unpunished. She is physical, aggressive, relentless on the glass, and capable of making a quiet interior presence pay a real price on the scoreboard. If Boston shows up tonight as the player she was built to be, active, dominant, punishing in the post, Indiana has a front court option that keeps them in the game. If Boston shows up as the player she has too often been this season, drifting, passive, operating on the perimeter rather than the paint, the Aces will feast on that mismatch from the opening tip. The front court battle tonight may be the most decisive individual matchup of the entire game, and the honest evaluation of where both players are right now points clearly in one direction. Sophie Cunningham has said things out loud this season that the broader conversation around this franchise has sometimes danced around. Her message has been consistent, direct, and genuinely refreshing in a media environment that too often rewards carefully managed vagueness over honest clarity.
The noise around this team, the organizational drama, the coaching debates, the national conversation about whether the people surrounding Indiana's most important player are actually committed to supporting her properly, has been louder than almost anything happening on the actual court.
Cunningham's position cuts through that noise with something simple and necessary. Get off the internet. Stop letting external conversations colonize your mental space. Lock in on the basketball. Execute at the highest possible level. Because at the end of the night, the scoreboard doesn't register organizational dysfunction. It doesn't track coaching philosophy debates. It doesn't account for media narratives or social media arguments. It registers baskets and stops, and whether you competed well enough to win. That message applies with particular urgency to tonight, because Indiana does not need another chapter in its ongoing organizational narrative right now. It needs players who find a way to compete. It needs Mitchell to be locked in. It needs Boston to be physical. It needs bench contributors, whether that's Sophie Cunningham herself knocking down threes from the corner or Maisha Hines-Allen creating in transition to provide something real beyond the starting lineup. It needs effort and execution to carry what talent and circumstances cannot. The external noise will still be there after the final buzzer. What gets decided tonight is simpler and more immediate than any of that. Now here is where a genuinely fair assessment has to acknowledge something that Clark's most vocal supporters sometimes underweight. Stephanie White has a documented pattern of getting competitive performances in games where Indiana is not favored. There is something in how she prepares teams for underdog situations, perhaps the freedom that comes with reduced expectations, perhaps the tactical focus that adversity generates that has produced legitimate results in spots where Indiana should have been overwhelmed. That history is real, and it deserves acknowledgement in any honest preview of this game. But here is where that acknowledgement runs directly into a wall. White's documented failure mode, the pattern that critics have pointed to repeatedly and with increasing frustration throughout this season, is the in-game adjustment. When a game plan is working and Indiana is competing within their established structure, she can manage a game reasonably well. When the game plan stops working, when a lead evaporates, when the opponent makes an adjustment that disrupts Indiana's rhythm, the historical response has been to stay the course, to run the same plays, to trust the same personnel in the same configurations, even when the results are clearly indicating that something needs to change. Against the Las Vegas Aces, that failure mode is not a minor concern, it is a central one. The Aces coaching staff has spent years demonstrating exactly the kind of in-game adaptability that exploits static opponents. They read defensive tendencies and attack them. They identify mismatches mid-game and deploy them ruthlessly. They make halftime adjustments that turn close games into comfortable wins. If Indiana falls behind early tonight, and the matchup suggests that is a real possibility, the critical question is not whether Stephanie White wants to make adjustments. The question is whether she has the tactical creativity and the decisiveness to actually make them in real time against a coaching staff operating at that level. The season's history does not provide confidence that the answer is yes. Let's put it all together with the clarity the moment deserves. The Las Vegas Aces have multiple dangerous offensive options. They have an interior presence posting near 30-point games. They have veteran playmakers who control game tempo with composed authority. They have a coaching staff that has built and sustained a legitimate contender through smart decisions and consistent excellence. And tonight, they're playing at home, in their building, against a team operating without its most important player. Indiana has Kelsey Mitchell shot-making. They have an Aaliyah Boston who needs to rediscover something she's misplaced this season. They have a bench that has been deployed inconsistently all year and now needs to deliver when the moment is largest. And they have a coaching staff whose most significant in-game liability, the inability to adjust when the initial plan stops working, is most exposed against exactly the kind of opponent they're facing tonight. The contrast between these two franchises at this specific moment is not subtle. One has built genuine organizational coherence. The other has Caitlin Clark,
who, when healthy and properly surrounded, is the most individually impactful player in this league, operating within an environment that has generated sustained national conversation about whether the people responsible for supporting her are actually doing that job.
Strip away the storylines, remove the organizational noise, take away the coaching debates and the media narratives and the social media arguments about what this team should be. What is left on the floor tonight is a competitive reality that points in one direction. Las Vegas has more options, more depth, more tactical sophistication, and is not missing a player whose absence creates a gap this large in their offensive production. Indiana needs near-perfect conditions to be competitive in this game. Mitchell efficient, not just active. Boston dominant, not just present. Bench contributors delivering, not just logging minutes. Defense disciplined and physical for 40 minutes against a roster with multiple ways to hurt you. All of that happening simultaneously in Las Vegas against a team that doesn't need everything to go right because they have enough options to compensate when something goes wrong. When the engine is removed and the scaffolding stands alone, what do the Indiana Fever actually look like? Tonight answers that question in real time. And based on everything the evidence of this season has shown, the honest answer is that what stands without Caitlin Clark is a team that is not built to beat the Las Vegas Aces. The Aces handle business tonight. The only real question is by how much, and whether Stephanie White's underdog tendencies produce anything resembling a competitive fight before the final buzzer confirms what the matchup always suggested. What happens in the following weeks to Indiana's roster decisions, Clark's return timeline, and White's coaching seat could be shaped significantly by what goes down tonight. Watch this game carefully. It's not just a game, it's a mirror.